What would be the fate of the ISS after Russia and Ukraine events? Have you ever wondered how much longer will the space station keep functioning? Will it ever retire? And what will happen to it after the Ukraine crisis? The International Space Station has been home to astronauts since the year 2000. It was pretty small back then, which is evident from this image of the space station taken by astronauts of Expedition 1 in December of 2000. Since then, the ISS has seen a number of astronauts from different nations come and go, conducting different microgravity experiments and advancing science. But recently, things have evolved, and not in a good way. NASA announced their plan to dissolve the ISS by 2031, which was never meant to stay so long, and relations between Roscosmos and NASA have degraded in the past 2 years, with the recent Ukraine crisis causing the future to look bleak. So what will be the fate of the ISS? Will NASA end their partnership with Roscosmos and take over the space station? What will replace the ISS after its end? In this video, we will talk about these questions in more detail and talk about the recent announcement by NASA. About 300 people have lived on the ISS, with nearly 110 countries participating in some way or another. More than 3,000 types of research has been published in the last 20 years or so, with approximately 5,000 researchers participating in some way. In other words, this has been a highly successful scientific goal, and still there are still many ongoing tests and many more important instruments, including truly powerful X-ray tools that look at the night sky as well. They teach us more about the universe. But the thing is, the ISS was never really expected to work so long, and most of the modules on the ISS have been designed for a lifetime of about 15 years, which means that by 2013 most of the modules had passed their expiry date. It's only through various repairs and modifications that the scientists and researchers have been able to prolong its lifetime. On January 31, 2022, NASA announced that the Biden administration had extended the space station's operations until 2030, which will make it 33 years old, with most modules approximately 16 years past their expiry date. In theory, some modules can be modified and can work for a long time. There are, however, some problems and some modules that are too expensive to replace. For example, solar panel damage and battery failure are really a big factor here. To replace all of these solar panels will be costly for both NASA and many other institutions involved in the project, and adding new solar panels will increase NASA's budget indefinitely. So eventually, the solar panels and batteries are going to expire by 2028. As a result, a few years ago, it was proposed to end the work in 2024, mainly because funding is now a problem, and it is clear that the channel is too expensive. The entire station costs about $4 billion a year to operate, as costs go up due to inflation. And within a month, Russia conducted its own ASAT tests, producing even more debris and, ironically, endangered the Chinese space station. Things haven't been very good for the ISS in recent years, too. Since 2018, there has been a lot of drama between NASA and Roscosmos, which came as a surprise for everyone. A very major mishap happened with the docking of the NACA module. Following the docking due to some form of software disruption within the module, it suddenly and unexpectedly began to shoot its thrusters, producing the first emergency on the ISS years ago. The emergency actually caused the International Space Station to start circulating uncontrollably for a long time. Although the spin itself was small, about half a degree per second, it was still large enough to damage the channel. On top of this, there were more issues with Roscosmos. A few years ago, there was a hole in one of the Russian modules, a hole that was leaking a lot of air. It was finally discovered that the hole was probably drilled by someone, and although initially NASA discovered it was probably a stupid production error last year, the Roscosmos decided to blame the NASA atmosphere for creating a hole. According to them, Chancellor Serena was mentally disturbed while on the ISS at the time. But the question is, how could he reach the Russian module and drill a hole in it? Well, it is still a mystery, and it was really an insult for Roscosmos to even say that. There have been other incidents too, and the reason we mention that is because of a major change of power within Roscosmos in 2018. And in 2018 itself, Dmitry Rogozin was appointed as the head of Roscosmos. This is very ironic because for many years he had been an outspoken critic of the space industry. He even suggested shutting down Roscosmos earlier. How he became the head of the space agency is still mysterious, but ever since, the ties between NASA and Roscosmos haven't been great, and there have been problems within Roscosmos itself. For example, $400 million went missing and nobody knows where it went. The space station was built after the Russian space program was merged with the American module in 1998. Construction was completed in 2011, and astronauts from 19 countries have visited the station since then. The recent comments from Roscosmos make it clear that the leadership of the agency is not really helping the cooperation at ISS. Ever since the Ukraine crisis, things have worsened. The United States imposed strict sanctions on Russia that would affect Russia's space programs and technological advancement. The sanctions aim to cut off Russia from advanced cutting-edge technologies. This move did not resonate well with Rogozin, as he openly threatened to end the cooperation on ISS and deorbit the space station and crash it on either India or China. This is because the ISS needs the propulsion module that is provided by Russia, but such outspoken and immature behavior is not expected from the head of Roscosmos. Rogozin further got into a heated conversation with former NASA astronaut Scott Kelly on Twitter and eventually blocked him later. Scott Kelly was no random target, as he openly called out the blustery of the Roscosmos head. Rogozin is familiar with harsh, contentious language. In 2014, for example, when he was Russia's deputy prime minister, Rogozin suggested that NASA use a trampoline to send its astronauts to the space station. This was an expression of dissatisfaction with the sanctions imposed after the Russian invasion of Crimea. At that time, the Soyuz spacecraft were the only vehicles capable of transporting astronauts to and from the surrounding lab. Russian space authorities have condemned the sanctions, and as a result, they have blocked the sale of Russian-made rocket engines to American corporations, as well as launches of Russian-built Soyuz rockets from Europe's spaceport in French Guiana, among other actions. And while announcing that Russia would no longer be able to sell rocket engines to the US companies, he said on national television, "Let them fly on something else, their broomsticks." Funny enough, Elon Musk responded with his own tweet mentioning the Falcon 9's launch and calling it America's broomstick. Because of the recent comments from Roscosmos and the sanctions by the United States, the cooperation on ISS looks shakier and shakier every day, and the leadership is not helping the situation. So at this point, what the future of Russian contribution to the ISS will be until 2031, maybe Russia withdraws from the space station by 2024 or even before that. That would be extremely frustrating for many Russian scientists who have worked in similar fields for decades. Anyway, there have been a lot of games because of this and a lot of uncertainty about what will happen with Russia's impact. Despite all these struggles and conflicts, NASA has officially expanded the work and finally announced when the work will be completed, and a formal commitment until at least 2030, when the space station would deorbit and crash at Point Nemo in the Pacific Ocean. The crisis in Ukraine may or may not be the tipping point for the cooperation between NASA and Roscosmos. But one thing is sure, ISS will eventually be decommissioned, and when that happens, new space stations by private entities and other government agencies will have the responsibility of taking the research in space forward. It's inevitable, like all good things, that the ISS won't last forever. Private companies such as Axiom Space and Blue Origin are currently building their own space stations, and Roscosmos plans to launch its own station in 2025. The Indian Space Research Organization showed in 2019 that it could completely cross the ISS with plans to launch a 20-ton space station. The goal here would be to slowly transition to the private missions with some modules of the ISS that could be used for these private missions later on. The hope is that private companies will take the concept of a global orbit station and bring back all functionality and all the scientific research through their modules, their stations, and obviously their finances. NASA has recently awarded nearly $500 million to 3 different commercial companies, NanoRacks, Northrop Grumman, and the Blue Origin team of Jeff Bezos, to begin basically working on the first commercial space projects, which should be implemented over the next few years. And if NASA decides who to allocate the project to, assuming all is well in 2033, NASA expects to save at least $1.7 billion a year by making the station commercially viable instead of a government subsidy. So there will be astronauts and there will be machines in the space station. The ISS itself will be discontinued. So what do you think will happen to the Russian-US cooperation on the ISS? What will be the fate of the ISS? Let us know what you think in the comment section below. Also, make sure to like our video and subscribe to our channel, as it encourages us to keep making amazing videos like this for you. Thanks.